really getting into something fundamental, the nature of political power. But we're looking at it through a lens you might not expect.
Yeah, we're diving deep into Gene Sharp's monumental work, The Politics of Nonviolent Action.
Right. And the goal here.
Well, our mission really is to pull out the core insights from Sharp's pretty extensive analysis. We want to help you understand not just what nonviolent action is, but maybe more importantly, how it challenges our usual thinking about power and conflict.
Because we usually jump straight to force, to violence, don't we?
Exactly. That's the common focus.
Yeah.
But Sharp just meticulously goes through the effectiveness of nonviolence, and he backs it all up with, tons of historical examples.
Okay, so let's dig into this. Sharp kicks things off by questioning our basic idea of power itself. We tend to think of it as something imposed, top-down, demanding obedience. But what if it's actually rooted in something, different, like consent?
That's precisely his radical starting point. Sharp argues that political power isn't some abstract thing, it's inherent in almost all human relationships. And the big question is always who controls it.
So he's not saying get rid of power.
No, not at all. Unlike maybe some utopian thinkers, Sharp sees that power has to be wielded, especially, to control groups or regimes that pose a threat.
Okay.
But here's the twist. He suggests that obedience to a ruler isn't just about being forced. It's largely voluntary.
Voluntary? How so?
Well, the ruler's power ultimately depends on the subject's goodwill, their cooperation, their assistance. Think about it from the technical experts right down to the factory workers.
Right.
If that authority is denied, if people just stop cooperating, that power can essentially just dissolve.
That really flips the script. So it's not necessarily the physical force itself, the sanctions that ensures obedience, maybe the fear of it, or the acceptance of it.
Precisely. It's the perception and the fear. And this reminds me of what Symbol pointed out even in relationships that look totally unequal, like historically a master and slave, or even just a speaker in an audience.
Yeah.
There's this hidden, really complex interaction going on, a kind of mutual dependence, even if it's not obvious.
Okay, I see that.
And Sharp really hammers this home, drawing on lots of thinkers, Comte, Green, MacIver, Harris. He quotes Harris saying, "Brawn, guns, and batons are but the tools employed. Power itself is not a physical phenomenon at all. It is always and only a social phenomenon."
Wow, always social, not physical.
Exactly. So even the most powerful ruler, Machiavelli's prince or Rousseau's strongest person, they can't rely on brute strength alone indefinitely. They need to somehow transform that strength into a perceived right to rule or gain the satisfaction and loyalty of the people.
Otherwise, the power just isn't sustainable.
Right. Without that social foundation, that consent, it just can't last.
Okay, this is fascinating. And this is where Sharp doesn't just stay theoretical, right? He gives us this incredible toolkit.
Oh, absolutely.
He shows that nonviolent action isn't just like passively accepting things. It's a whole arsenal of practical methods. What kind of things are we talking about?
It's an incredibly diverse range.
Sure.
Sharp actually identified nearly 200 distinct methods. And interestingly, many were used by people who weren't pacifists personally.
They just saw it as an effective tactic.
Exactly. A political technique. And Sharp notes it's still kind of an underdeveloped political technique compared to how much we've refined military strategy.
Oh, okay.
So he groups these methods into three main buckets: nonviolent protest and persuasion,
Okay.
nonviolent non-cooperation,
Got it.
and nonviolent intervention.
And the examples he uses, they really stick with you. For protest and persuasion, these are acts meant to send a message, right? To dissent, to convince.
Yeah, symbolic communication, often.
I mean, think about the sheer bravery of groups like the Bomb Group or the White Rose students in Nazi Germany distributing leaflets, knowing the risks.
Incredible courage.
Or the Czechoslovaks displaying their flags everywhere in Prague during the '68 invasion. A powerful visual statement.
Definitely. Or even things like the American colonists using mass meetings, like under the Liberty Tree, or the French using political banquets in 1847 because regular meetings were banned, or the teach-ins during the Vietnam War era. All ways to protest and persuade.
Okay, so that's protest and persuasion, then non-cooperation. This sounds like where you really start withdrawing that consent we talked about.
Exactly. This is about refusing to participate, withdrawing the cooperation that the opponent needs to function.
Like what?
Sharp gives so many examples. The sports strike in Nazi-occupied Norway athletes just refused to compete. Simple, but effective in showing defiance.
Right.
Or the Indian peasant tactic of migrating en masse to another state, like Baroda, to avoid paying unfair taxes. just removing themselves from the equation.
Wow, they just left.
Yep. Or think about strikes. The Berlin printers' strike during the Kapp Putsch in 1920 was crucial. The coup leaders couldn't get their decrees printed.
Huh. That's practical non-cooperation.
Absolutely. Or even subtler things,
Right.
like African slaves feigning illness to sick in to slow down work, or Prague citizens boycotting German newspapers and streetcars after the Nazi takeover.
Okay.
And the American colonists again practicing austerity, simplifying funerals, boycotting imported goods to protest the Stamp Act, even Russian serfs refusing payments after the 1861 emancipation, or French police deliberately stalling on implementing Nazi anti-Jewish measures. Yeah, Sharp cites this as a factor in what he calls Hitler's defeat, in that specific effort against Jews and mixed marriages in France.
Yeah.
It shows how non-cooperation within the system can be powerful.
That's a huge range. Okay, so the third category, nonviolent intervention. How is that different?
Intervention involves more direct disruption or the creation of alternative institutions. It's not just refusing, it's actively getting in the way or building something new.
Okay.
Like
yeah.
the fish-ins used by Native Americans to assert treaty fishing rights, deliberately breaking unjust laws to highlight them.
Oh, okay. Civil disobedience territory.
Right. Or the Montgomery bus boycott. It wasn't just not riding the buses. They created a whole alternative carpool system, a parallel institution.
Which kept the boycott going and showed community power.
Exactly. Or Norwegian teachers during the Nazi occupation who refused to join the fascist teachers union but kept teaching without collaboration, maintaining educational independence. And in more extreme cases, you see the creation of parallel governments, like the American colonists did with their continental congresses and committees, effectively taking over governmental functions. Sharp quotes a contemporary source saying the British government was totally annihilated and assumed by congresses, councils, and committees. Hungary saw similar things during its resistance.
So it's really taking control.
In a way, yes. It's actively intervening to change the situation, not just protesting or withdrawing.
These examples really drive home that these aren't just symbolic acts.
Not at all. They are very deliberate, often highly strategic efforts to pull the rug out from under the opponent by removing those sources of power, the authority, the cooperation, the resources that they absolutely depend on. It's about making it impossible for them to continue ruling or imposing their will.
So if power does hinge on consent, and these methods are about withdrawing it, what actually happens? How does this force change? What are the dynamics at play?
Well, this leads to something Sharp calls political Juujitsu. It's a fascinating concept.
Juujitsu, how does that work politically?
It's the idea that when an opponent uses violent repression against disciplined nonviolent actionists, that violence can actually backfire. It throws the opponent off balance, politically and psychologically.
Okay, give me an example.
Think about Bloody Sunday in Russia, 1905. The Tsar's troops fired on peaceful petitioners. The sheer brutality of it absolutely shattered the people's faith in the Tsar as their protector. It alienated vast numbers of people and, Sharp argues, made the subsequent revolution possible. The violence rebounded against the Tsar.
So the repression strengthened the opposition.
In many cases, yes.
Yeah.
Or look at the Montgomery bus boycott again. When segregationists bombed homes and churches,
Yeah.
that violence actually alienated moderate white opinion. People who might have been neutral suddenly started supporting law and order, which in that context meant stopping the segregationist violence and indirectly helped the boycotts.
Interesting. The violence backfired.
Exactly. Another example Sharp uses is the French occupation of the Ruhr Valley in Germany after World War I. The Germans resisted nonviolently strikes, non-cooperation. The French used harsh measures, arrests, even killings. And eventually French soldiers and even French civilians started to sympathize with the Germans. They saw the injustice of the repression against unarmed people. Some even became, quote, advocates for the Germans. The nonviolent resistance combined with the repression changed hearts and minds on the other side.
That's political jujitsu in action. Okay, so beyond that dynamic, how does Sharp see the change actually happening? What are the mechanisms?
He identifies three main ways nonviolent action can succeed. First, there's conversion.
The opponent actually changes their mind.
Yes. They're genuinely persuaded by the actionist's case, maybe due to moral arguments, trust, shared values, or sometimes pressure from others. Sharp admits this is probably the rarest outcome.
Okay, rare but possible. What's next?
Second, accommodation. This is more common. The opponent doesn't change their core beliefs, but they decide it's strategically better to concede.
Why?
Maybe the struggle is just costing too much economically, politically, socially. Or they want to cut their losses, avoid looking weak, maybe grant some demands to stop the disruption without admitting they were wrong.
Ah, like a calculated retreat?
Exactly. The Bardoli tax refusal campaign in India is a classic example.
Yeah.
The British government eventually found a face-saving way to grant the peasants' demands without explicitly saying the nonviolent campaign forced them to. They accommodated.
Got it. And the third?
The third is nonviolent coercion. This is where the opponent wants to keep fighting, they haven't changed their mind, they haven't decided to accommodate, but they simply can't continue.
Why not?
Because their sources of power have been so effectively undermined or removed by the nonviolent action, primarily through widespread non-cooperation. Their authority is crumbled, they lack the necessary human resources, skills aren't available, material resources are cut off, their ability to apply sanctions is neutralized.
So the system just breaks down.
Pretty much, they're paralyzed. Sharp mentions a fascinating point about 1938. Germany, the Nazis, apparently feared the possibility of mass resignations by high-ranking army officers opposed to war plans. That kind of collective non-cooperation at a high level could have potentially coerced Hitler, or at least severely hampered him. That's the coercive potential.
Wow. So conversion, accommodation, or coercion, that covers a lot of ground. What about the impact on the people actually doing the nonviolent action? How does it change them or society?
Oh, the impact is huge. Sharp talks about significant psychological shifts within the group engaged in the struggle.
Like what?
Well, it tends to shatter old patterns of conformity and submission. People gain self-respect, they become more confident, more aware of their own inherent power, they realize they can make a difference.
That sounds empowering.
It really is. And there are even these interesting reports Sharp cites during major nonviolent campaigns in places like Montgomery or Jackson, Mississippi, or Harlem. Rates of crime and juvenile delinquency actually went down.
Really? Why?
Possibly because people found a constructive, collective way to channel their frustrations and assert their dignity, rather than through antisocial acts. They had a shared purpose.
Yeah, makes sense.
Nonviolent action also tends to build greater unity within the group fighting for change. Think about the American colonists. Their nonviolent campaigns against British policies forged an unprecedented sense of common identity and purpose among the different colonies.
Right, uniting them against a common opponent.
Exactly. And perhaps most fundamentally, Sharp argues that successful nonviolent action inherently leads towards a diffusion of power throughout society, meaning it empowers ordinary people. It gives them the tools, the experience, and the confidence to hold rulers accountable in the future. It spreads power rather than concentrating it.
So it's clear this isn't passive at all. It's highly active, strategic. Sounds like it requires a lot of preparation.
Absolutely critical. Discipline, organization, and careful strategic planning are paramount. This isn't just about spontaneous protest, it's about sustained campaigns.
Yeah.
Gandhi really emphasized this. He talked about the importance of quality, irrespective almost of quantity. He believed even a small but highly trained and disciplined group of nonviolent actionists could have an immense impact.
Quality over quantity. Makes sense for maintaining discipline under pressure.
Definitely. And another point Sharp raises, which is quite counterintuitive, is the strategic value of openness and non-secrecy, even against ruthless regimes.
Being open, wouldn't that expose you to danger?
You'd think so. But Sharp argues with examples that secrecy can actually undermine morale, create distrust, and make it harder to mobilize broad support. Openness, on the other hand, can demonstrate confidence, build legitimacy, and sometimes even confuse or disarm the opponent.
Can you give an example of that working?
He points to the resistance in Berlin in 1943 against the deportation of Jewish men in mixed marriages. It was largely driven by their non-Jewish wives protesting openly, publicly. Goebbels' diaries apparently show how frustrated the Nazi leadership was by this open defiance. They didn't know how to handle it without causing even more unrest. Sharp calls it one of Hitler's few defeats on that front, achieved through open non-cooperation.
Wow. That is counterintuitive but powerful. Okay, one more thing that sounds intense is Sharp's discussion of the necessity of suffering. Is suffering just like an unavoidable side effect, or is it actually part of the strategy itself?
It's a tough concept, but yeah, Sharp argues it's often strategically significant. Suffering, when it's voluntarily accepted as part of the struggle, and crucially, when met without retaliation. It can become a kind of weapon. It demonstrates the depth of commitment, it can awaken the conscience of the opponent or third parties, and it starkly reveals the brutality of the system being opposed. It helps fuel that political jujitsu we talked about.
So enduring hardship non-violently highlights the injustice.
Exactly. It can blunt the edge of the tyrant's sword, as Sharp puts it. Now, he absolutely acknowledges the real costs economic losses, like the American colonists faced with boycotts, or the massive disruption in the root camp, imprisonment, injury, even death.
Right, it's not minimizing the pain.
Not at all. But he consistently argues that compared to the scale of suffering typically seen in violent political conflicts or wars, the suffering in nonviolent struggles, while real and difficult, is usually far less in terms of loss of life and overall destruction. And the changes achieved might be more durable.
That's a crucial comparison to make.
So really, if you tie this all together, looking at the politics of nonviolent action, Gene Sharp's fundamental message is that political power isn't monolithic. It depends deeply on the consent and the cooperation of the people being governed.
Yeah.
And once you grasp that, nonviolent action emerges not just as a moral choice, but as a deeply practical, often powerful way to challenge and change power structures. His work gives us the framework, the how-to almost.
So thinking about this whole deep dive, what does this mean for you listening? Gene Sharp's analysis really pushes us to rethink where power actually comes from and how change truly occurs. It's this powerful reminder, isn't it, that even when facing what looks like overwhelming force, the organized collective withdrawal of that consent, of that cooperation, it can create this irresistible friction, this counterpower.
Absolutely.
So what's the one thing that really stands out to you from all this? How might understanding Sharp's perspective shift how you look at conflict, power, maybe even influence in your own community or life? Definitely something to think about.